Cheers, guys. The tradition continues. So it's a cappuccino and a preview. And let's get stuck into it. I got to admit, I'm not a fan of Thursday night football. I'm a fan of Thursday night football when my team's not playing. I can get home from work. I can have something to eat. I can sit back on the couch and I can just enjoy some football. If it's a shit game like it was, I think was it the showdown on Thursday night last week? On the Thursday, I think it was. I was completely bored with that game, so I went to bed at half time. But I want to go to this game. I actually want to go to this game. I want to be there tomorrow night at the G. And you know, it's not all about me, but given that, you know, you got to get up and go to work on a Friday, getting into the G on a Thursday night, and yeah, if the result doesn't go your way, it's a long way home, and then you by the time you hit the hay, it's 12:15, and you're getting up in a bad mood. So I'm not a massive fan of Thursday night football, but I can from a TV perspective. People who love football, you know, on as many days of the week as possible. I can understand the appeal. And don't get me wrong, when Carlton are not playing, I love getting home on a Thursday and knowing that there's some football on. Okay, so in saying all that, we've got a game to play tomorrow, round 9. I reckon now against somewhat of I'm not saying an arch rival, but we're building up a bit of a resume against Melbourne in regards to just some really tight games and a bit of a modern rivalry, if you could call it that. It's just been some extraordinary close games. I mean, we know the final from last year was just so close, and even the game before that late in the season, the one which we won, which put us on the way to cementing a final spot, was really close as well. And I think even the game before that, when we were in poor form, was close until late in that game where the D's just drifted away from it. I probably am expecting another relatively low-scoring affair because of the conditions. It's going to be a beautiful day tomorrow. I think it's going to be 18 degrees, but the time this game will start, it will be a little bit slippery, a little bit dewy, which I feel will suit Melbourne. If we remember that final last year, it was dry. It was actually a really warm day. I feel like if it's slippery and their defensive structures will help them, it will just make it a little bit more difficult for our key forwards. But who knows? Who knows whether that, in fact, will be in the favour of Melbourne. But I'm not confident. I'm not feeling it at the moment with this team of ours. Although in the preview I said, for me, it's about waiting to see what happens. But I'm a little bit worried, and I must say I'm pretty happy with the thumbnail I put together. With Simon Goodwin with Vossi in the headlock and just choking the absolute daylight out of him and suffocating him and putting him to sleep. And you can read so much into that thumbnail, guys. But basically, I think Melbourne are in a really good spot at the moment. A really confident spot. And I think the difference between us and them, I think we're capable talent-wise to really challenge them, obviously. I see that their favourites just $1.70. I think we're $2.03, which is pretty close. But the pundits the punters have jumped off us. It is what it is. But I feel like they know their game. They know their game so well, Melbourne. And I don't know about us. I feel like we are really second guessing ourselves at the moment, at the moment, and yeah, I just don't know. I just don't know right here, right now, would we are going into this game with the confidence or the flair and the creativity to be able to to challenge the defensive structures of Melbourne. Geelong couldn't do it last week. And something says to me, if Melbourne can break even in the midfield, this becomes such a difficult task for us to be able to score from maybe our back half. That's my feeling, because they do set up so well. And I'm not even mentioning how fucking tight their back line is. You know, tight as fish's arseholes. You know, you look at the combination of Goodwin and Stephen May. And I must admit, outside of our football club, I don't like Melbourne, don't get me wrong, but outside of our football club, I love Stephen May. He's clearly my favourite player outside of Carlton. I just love him. There was a situation last week against Geelong. Was it when it may have even been the last quarter? It may have been the last quarter because Melbourne were kicking towards the punt road end, and Stephen May had made a mistake. He pushed up the ground and he must have turned the ball over, made a really bad decision by foot. And he turned it over to Geelong, and there was an open forward line that Geelong could go into. And I've never seen a more desperate individual in all my life in Stephen May, rushing back, sprinting back as fast as he could, like his life depended on it. Geelong didn't end up kicking a goal. I've never seen a more desperate guy, and those confrontations he has with Jake Lever, where they just hammer each other, are just gold. I think they hate being beaten. They're so fucking competitive, those two. And I think it rubs off on them from a defensive point of view, because I think if you're going to be a really strong defensive team, you've got to be fucking competitive. You've got to be competitive. You know, you got to hate being defeated. And sometimes I question that with us, you know, and I think we will continue to question it until we taste the real thing. You know, we taste the real thing, and that's a premiership. And Melbourne have been there. They've been there. They've done it before. They've been a successful team. You know, they've played finals. They've been there. And it comes down to that competitive nature. And I listened to really interesting interview with Craig McRae on SEN during the week with Andy Maher and Andrew Gaze, and they were talking about the discrepancy of inside 50s between us and Collingwood on Friday night, the fact that they dominated inside 50s in that game. And Craig McRae sort of said, look, we as a coaching staff, look, we look at the stats, you know, like they're there, we look at them, but sometimes we overrate the stats, you know, we overrate them a little bit. We look too much into them. And he spoke more about just in that game in particular for his boys to find a way to win. And that was all based around, for him, was based around pressure. And particularly their midfielders' ability to put us under immense heat. And we couldn't handle it. We couldn't handle it all. And he actually referenced their opening round game of the year against the Sydney Swans, where they were taught a lesson in the way to pressure the opposition when you haven't got the ball in hand. And they went away from that game, that opening game against Sydney, and thought, this is where we need to get back to. And they've turned it around. And I hope for this game anyway, that we learned a lesson from last week in that regards. I thought our pressure was pretty poor at times, which says a little bit, the fact that we only lost by 6 points. But if we cannot bring that immense pressure and learn from what Collingwood did to us last week and bring that to the table against Melbourne, I think we're in for a tough day at the office, because we know they have some beasts in there, some real competitive beasts. And we talk about, you know, Jack Viney and Petrarca and Oliver. And don't forget, you know, their leader, Max Gawn, as well. And they've got players on the periphery who love to fight. They love to fight. So I am not going to this game, guys, confident at all. Let's look at some selection news. I think that's probably interesting. Simon Goodwin has confirmed today that small premiership defender Jake Bowie, who hasn't played since round one, talk about tough nut. I mean, he's a courageous little player. He hurt his shoulder in round one against Sydney. Justin McInerney, I think it may have been. They collided, and he's been out for since then with that shoulder injury, and he's back, which I think is a big in for them, because if we reference that from last week against Collingwood, one player that really hurt us, and they're like for like in regards, they virtually play the same game, was John Noble. And I look at Jake Bowie, I look at his size, I look at his speed, I look at his ball-winning ability and his ability to use the ball. He's pretty good by foot as well. Then it just feels like, that's a good in for Melbourne. They had their captain's run today. Ben Brown and who was the other boy they brought into that? Oh, Marty Hall came in with the 23 other guys that played last week. I can't see Ben Brown coming into this team. I think they've got the big tools down there in relatively good form in Van Ruin, and also who's the other boy that plays down there in their front half. He's got a bit of size about him. I'll get to that shortly. Who have they got? Oh, Harrison Petty. Harrison Petty, who didn't play in that final against us last year. He's just found a little bit of form. So I wouldn't think Marty Hall or Ben Brown come into that lineup. So I think they'll probably just make the one change. Jake Bowie would come in maybe Billings was subbed out in the last quarter last week. Bailey Laurie came in as the sub. Maybe Taj Woden may come out of that team. I think Billings will play. They like to rotate him across half forward or on a wing. Not quite sure, but they don't have a lot of injuries at the moment. They're nearly at full strength. Obviously, they'd love to get Christian Salem back. He's been out for a period of time as well. Charlie Spargo, Jake Melsham with that knee injury, and Josh Shackey is the other one injured at the D's, but they're not bringing Josh Shackey into this team right here, right now, because they are, to me, just purring along really nicely at the moment. Melbourne, for us, had our captain's run this morning as well. Martin and McGovern trained in the captain's run. There was no Marchbank, no Lewis Young, and apparently Zach Williams didn't train, although he did make an appearance. Now, he was subbed off last week for us and was replaced by Matthew Kennedy. So I would think that Martin and McGovern come in. They come in. Who goes out, though? Obviously, Lewis Young goes out for McGovern. I'm not quite sure if Kemp trained. I don't know if Billy Wilson trained. I don't know some other blokes who played in the VFL, whether they trained in that captain's run, but I would think McGovern comes in for Lewis Young and Martin potentially comes in for Fantasia. I'd be very surprised if Orazio Fantasia plays in this game, but we're just going to have to wait and see. And there's a big question mark on Zach Williams, big question mark, given that he was subbed out with a sore glute. But who knows? We've had other players subbed out this year, like Elijah Hollands, and came in the following week and played really well. So we'll just have to wait and see on that. I spoke about Melbourne and their team, and they're not I suppose they're not going to tear you a new one on the scoreboard. But they do have some impact players in their front half who can they can get on a roll, and I talk about someone like Bailey Fritsch who can cause headaches because he's such a difficult matchup. So he will need to be watched. Could that be a role for young Cowan? It would be a big role for him, but if you're going to play someone like Cowan, you're going to have to potentially give him a role, and a big role. I'd like to see that because he has the speed to go with Cowan and also, with Fritsch, and also the height. And the other one is Keziah Pickett. Now, Chincotta did a really good job on Bobby Hill last week, and I think that would be the likely matchup because I want Jordan Boyd to be somewhat freed up. We're not winning this game of fucking football, guys, unless we can get some speed and we can get some ball movement. I think McGovern will help that somewhat. But we're talking about getting the ball in the hands of our best players and trying to release, okay, some of our halfback flankers, whoever that may be, whoever plays in that position. So they're the two matchups I'd probably worry about the most in their front half. I think Harrison Petty and Jacob Van Ruin they're capable tall forwards, but you would think that Wiedering will go to one of those, maybe the deepest, and then you're looking at McGovern on the other. So that's interesting in itself. And up the other end of the ground, there's no doubt the big move that Melbourne have been able to do this year in their back half is bring Tom McDonald in, which will allow Jake Lever to play that intercept role. I think May will play on... Does he play on Charlie or does he play on Harry? But McDonald will take... I think McDonald may... that's an interesting one, but Lever won't play on one of our bigs. He will probably play on Jack Martin if he comes into this team. They've got some excellent runners. McVee is a young star. Really like the way he plays. They will need to be watched. And Trent Rivers, they love to release him, get him up the ground. And we know how strong their wingers have been. I mean, Langdon's been a good player for a very long time. And I think Caleb Windsor, is he due to have a poor one? I hope it's tomorrow night. I hope it's tomorrow night. And they got just fucking hard-working half-forward flankers who just get under your guard because they get up the bloody ground and they get involved in the chains. Alex Neil-Bullen, Cade bloody Chandler, they get up and they get involved in the game, and they've got a good mix going through that midfield, a really nice balance. Oliver Petrarca, Tom Sparrow, and not to mention Viney as well. So... I think they're going to suffocate us. I really don't. I don't think we've got the tools right here, right now, unless it's an absolute dogfight, and we can some way, as Craig McRae said, find a way to win. And that comes up here as much as it is in the skills and the fundamentals. I just feel like Melbourne are right now at round 9, guys, are in a better position mentally and physically than what we are at the moment. It almost feels like we are being squeezed, being tested, and we're not necessarily dealing with it at the moment. And I don't see bringing in Martin and McGovern necessarily helping us straight away. I really don't. They're better footballers than some of the blokes going out, but I don't feel they're going to make us a hell of a lot better right here, right now. Anyway, tell me what you think. I will be there with big voice. Big voice. It's a home game. Tell me what you think. Are you worried? It's a tough few weeks coming up for us, guys, and I can see us by the end of this round being outside the top 8. And who would have thought that? The funny thing is, isn't it? Before I fuck off and stop talking, we played 2 practice games at the start of the year, and there was a lot of talk at that time. I was one of them that was worried. I thought our pre-season form was pox, really pox. And we played Geelong in one of those games. They beat us comprehensively. And the other game we played was against Melbourne, and they smashed us. In that practice game. I don't think there's a correlation. There might be a correlation compared to what Melbourne are doing, the way they've approached this season compared to us right here, right now. That's enough. That's 20 minutes. Go Blues.